order. This is the ZBA meeting Tuesday, August 30th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting, so anyone that is dialing in, please use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Tonight's meeting is just specific for Mill Creek, so I'm going to open up with I'd like to hear from Greg Guimond, our town planner, and the plan he came up with. I'd like to start there. You're muted.
Not anymore. All right, Andrew, I'll share the screen.
Yeah, you're good to go.
All right, can you see the
Yep.
revised plan on the screen? All right, good evening. My name's Greg Guimond. I'm the town planner. I will walk through the recommended or suggested changes to the Mill Creek development site plan. We are not saying that this is what has to be developed. We're saying this would be a better solution for the site and for the town. I will read some of the statements that were in the planning board letter that has been submitted for the record, and I have added in a few pieces of information as I continue to try to review and address things. As we've all known over this summer, we have seen on TV and throughout the country climate change with its severe weather impacts, weather events, and droughts. On the town level, we are in a drought, and we have environmental services and fiscal limitations. And one example of these limitations is we have a water withdrawal limit permit from DEP, which is for 3.3 million gallons per day. In July, we were pumping on a couple of days 5.2 million gallons per day. As a town, we need to be aware of our limits and develop accordingly, and most importantly, not overdevelop. Marshfield already has the highest percentage of multifamily housing units in comparison to its 5 neighboring communities. On the planning board side, there have been a number of zoning changes, and the planning board will continue working on addressing the housing needs of the town in a manner that does not overwhelm town resources or town neighborhood. With regards to this development, the planning board is also concerned with securing proper town services and proper public transportation connections for the future residents of Mill Creek. The Mill Creek development is proposing now 282 units, originally 300, of housing on 2.6 acres, which constitutes roughly a density of 22.3 units per acre. That's almost double the recently completed 40B, now called the Madison next door, which was approved at a density of 12.6 units per acre. These two developments combined could add 530 units to a school district and area which roughly already has 1,000 existing multifamily units in it. This clearly overburdens one area of town as it relates to schools, traffic, and water use. The site development is slightly below the high point on a large hill. That high point is the Sprague Forest, which is town-owned. In order to get public transportation, i.e. the Gatra bus, to the supermarket, shops, restaurants, or schools, it requires a walk of over 3,400 feet in distance and a change in elevation when you're coming back home of 110 feet. That same hill, with this amount of additional units, also put an increased strain on the water pressure for the existing residents of the Madison, the Seasons, Highland Green, Seth Sprague, and Old Woodlock Plain. Never mind the units down on Plain Street or any of the industrial uses. Planning board strongly supports the design changes that were provided to you by the planning staff on the recently revised plan that is shown on the screen. The master plan and previous housing production plans stress the need for affordable family housing in town. And in keeping with providing enhanced housing and a better site design, Planning Board recommends that the number of apartment buildings be reduced and replaced with more family-oriented townhomes as shown on that revised plan that's on the screen. This suggested site plan also allows for more open space as well as the opportunity for better grading and buffering. The site plan presented basically shows the elimination of all trees on the site. Now, it's interesting that the state will not let a solar farm cut down forest to create solar farms. But apparently it's okay to do it with 40Bs versus directing 40Bs onto redevelopment sites versus forested areas. Because all the trees are being removed, the Planning Board recommends a thoughtful and well-designed landscape plan that buffers the development from the industrial uses and district that it's in, but also provides buffering between buildings in order to enhance the privacy of the residents. Also, the amount of earth to be removed from the site and where this is going should be addressed and conditioned, because they're asking you to take care of the earth removal permit, which is a selectman jurisdiction, and there is limitations on removing soil from the town of Marshfield. Planning Board also recommends that the existing trail access and fire access to the town-owned property, Sprague Forest, adjacent to the development, be protected with fencing and improved access for hikers out onto Commerce Way. Currently, the property has the old fire trail running along its east and southern borders, and it weaves between some town land and this site. The proposed development plan that Mill Creek has provided basically removes a good portion of the fire trail because of regrading, etc. And the Planning Board is very concerned that there is no other fire access to the 100 acres of steep slope forest behind it. The Planning Board over the years worked closely with the current property owner, VRT, the state, other local departments and boards in addressing future traffic impacts on 139. The MEPA process and local approvals set up a fair share traffic mitigation program for the entire PMUD district. This property is part of that traffic agreement with VRT and the town. As such, the Planning Board strongly recommends the Zoning Board of Appeals requires this development to make a payment into the traffic improvement program based on its fair share trips of $96,428. Planning Board recommends that the applicant provide enhanced transportation opportunities for the future residents of Gatra, including a bus shelter on site and a yearly contribution of $40,000 to Gatra to allow for bus service up Commerce Way. This contribution would allow Gatra to reroute 11 weekday runs in each direction past the site and 7 Saturday runs in each direction past the site. And having the bus shelter on the Mill Creek property makes it easier for potential residents who may have mobility concerns to get around. Marshfield has challenged for just regular residents who do not drive or do not have the financial means to own vehicles. This is a 40B project, by the way, so we will have people that will have some limitations on their incomes. Therefore, it's important that the town gets some type of transportation. We had asked for that with Modera. We're asking again with this project. These two projects, that 40B, that 40,000 would cover both projects, plus it would allow residents from Highland Green and from the Seasons also access on the Gatra bus. In summation, the Planning Board recommends the ZBA approve with conditions the proposed 40B development at a density no greater than 190 units. Now that's up slightly from my original plan, which was 186, because I tried to use as much as possible their revised site plan with my changes. A reduction in units would allow for reduction in traffic impacts, water use, water pressure concerns, lot coverage, parking, emergency response calls, and school impacts. It would also provide more open space and a better site design by and addressing the density and size and height of buildings. As you step back, as you see, we have the pool in the clubhouse, and it has been suggested that the top lot be moved up into that area as well. Closest to Commerce, which is at the top of the screen, Commerce Way. Then you get into an area of all townhouses next to townhouses. And then you get to, at the back of the site is where the 4 apartment buildings, which were already there, would remain. By removing the pink area to the east side or to the right on your screen, or that pink parking being removed allows, with a retaining wall in a certain section, allows that fire trail to remain in place. They've already addressed vehicle access as you get down onto the driveway, but I would not want to make Modera have the pedestrian access for all town residents come in that way. I'm suggesting because between VRT and Mill Creek, that's where the 2 access points currently are. It's like an eyebrow or whatever. There should be a way by using the town land, VRT land, or a portion of their land that we could regrade this in a manner that there would be a adequate pedestrian access. I know that the Conservation Commission is going to ask about fencing. We would also suggest fencing because there is a lot of forest behind this site. Some is owner unknown, a lot of it is the town of Marshfield, and we don't want to have problems in the town forest being destroyed. It was suggested at the bottom that instead of having that trail connection to the very bottom of the screen where the hand's going back and forth right now, that we would have 2 crash gates that would allow access down into Duxbury, where the trail continues down into Duxbury for a portion, again for fire protection access. So that's the comments from the planning board letter. I do have one other thing, Mr. Chairman, that I would like to bring up, and that is we were requested, hold on 1 second, sorry. It had been asked in previous meetings about the land calculation, which is a 1.5. The actual name of that is General Land Area Minimum, or LAM. The planning board staff and a consultant under CPC funds has done some preliminary work on this. Here is the simple 7 things that the state requires, but once you get into their like 32-page guidelines, it is much more complicated and there are a lot of different steps. One of the things that was not explained in the simple ones is that you cannot just count wetlands. It has to be state designated wetlands, or it has to be a wetland zoning district that prohibits development in the wetland. Here are some of the steps that had to be done. Again, this took quite a while to do. Here was how it breaks down. So we start with the 18,345 acres for the town. We take out those town-owned lands. We take out, the other things that we're allowed to, remove, and which was 6,300, and we start our 1.5 calculation from the 12,015 acres. We then calculate the SHI, or where the affordable units already are. We did that. We included the Madison and the Mill Creek sites onto that. However, the Webster Village one and the Armstrong 40B, which both have been previously approved, but neither have been constructed, were not counted yet in this total. So you take all that information, you make the mathematical contribution, and you come out with just over 1%. We're supposed to be at 1.5. How do we get to the 1.5? Acquire unknown parcels, and there's a number of in town, which the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board have started working on with the selectmen. Purchase additional town-owned land, because all town-owned land counts towards this calculation. Consider zoning changes that would prohibit development in the inland wetland, not water district, and consider a conservation zoning district, which would, for privately held, so like Audubon lands and stuff, don't count for us in this calculation either, unless we put a zoning change in that would prohibit development of those conservation lands. Those lands already have conservation restrictions on them. That would be, one step that we certainly should take. So that first map that we do to get that just over one calculation, this is what happens, is the area in yellow is what still counts for that 1.5 calculation. The area in pink is where the affordable units are located already in town. If we did the zoning changes and acquire some additional lands, that adds that whole other area of like, not Barney purple, but a lighter shade of pinkish purple. This does not include the Red Gold Farm, but some of that would be subtracted because when you count wetlands and you count open space, we can't double count, so some of that would fall out. So as far as the, that would bring us up to 1.45%. And it would leave us roughly 200, sorry, I had the number, it's like 230 acres of town land that we would still have to get. And with that, I think I'm done, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so now we can go to you, Ed, any updates, and then we can go to the applicant.
So, Mr. Chairman, before you go to the Conservation Commission, I just had a couple quick questions for Greg. For the record, I'm Ed Pesci of Pesci Engineering and Associates, consulting engineer for the zoning board. Greg, the 96,428, that was also referenced I assume you provided that to them, but in the select board letter. Could you provide us the calculation to achieve that so I understand where that number came from? Happy to make that recommendation.
No, it was based on the trips,
Right.
afternoon peak trips.
Weekday
based
peak
on
trips.
The number of units.
Right, so I just need someone, because I come up with a different number of 94.5, so it's not far apart, but I just need to understand I need to see where that came from, just so I can recommend that number be used.
I will get it tomorrow morning and send it to you.
Okay, thank you. And the other point was that you had recommended that the applicant consider providing a on-site bus shelter, and I saw that you sent out an email today that you had spoken to the GATRA folks, and it looks like they're willing to do that, to actually make the run through the new site, right? And it would help service an area that's not currently served. Is that your point, I guess?
Yes, and I have been after GATRA for months. I'm the town's GATRA rep as well, as one of MBTA rep and a few other things. They have been in the midst of some major staff changes and stuff, so they were unable to until this morning when I finally got the amount from them.
Right. I just want to ask for the record, his email, to you said that the added miles for this service would cost about $40,000 a year. Is there a reason he told you what it would cost? Because it doesn't seem like that would be a cost that the town, they handle that with other funds, right? I mean, that's not something the town pays for, right?
The town is paying for the current GATRA service.
Okay, so would that require a vote by the select board?
I'm sorry, what?
Would that require a vote by and I don't know this, that's why I'm asking. Would that require a vote by select board to allow the $40,000 additional cost?
If the town had to pay the $40,000, we would have to go to town meeting, yes, so we would need selectmen support, we would need town meeting support. If the applicant was subsidizing the change, then there would be no additional cost to the town
Okay.
for that change, to have them run up and down the hill.
So they still won't do it without the additional cost being borne by someone?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an unanswered question. Okay? Then that clarifies it. Thank you.
All right, so I want to so I invited Bill Grafton from Conservation Commission, just to get a small dose of.
I noticed the chair of Concom is also here, so I defer to her if she's here, and wants to do that, or I'd be happy.
Sure, Craig, if you want to speak.
Craig Hannafin, 1317 Union Street. I am Chair of the Conservation Commission. We are very much in agreement with Mr. Guimond on everything he has just presented. We are especially concerned about limiting incursions around the property. Vandalism, fires, that's, potentially a major problem. We want to see fewer units, which results in less parking, better grading, and I believe you have a letter from me listing these points, but just for the record, we are in agreement. Do you have anything to add, Bill?
I have a letter, and that's basically it, Mr. Chairman and members of the CPA committee here. I think the key things were, as Greg had said, the south and the eastern edges completely fenced off to the chair's point also. There's very valuable water production properties down gradient. There are two things going on here. One, any alterations, people getting in there, we're going to see some changes. That'll have some effects. Additionally, in talking to Greg earlier, there's some water being rerouted, stormwater, etc. I think his design actually allows some percolation into the subsurface, considering we're losing trees, etc. So that's a positive thing, and it will allow some degree of recharge. The changes that the chair was talking about in the parking, that changes the steepness of the grades, that allows access. Fire is going to be a big deal out there. And additionally, those fire gates are important because this is all overgrowth trees, and if something happens, it's going to happen in a big way. And if the fire department can't get in there, a lot of people are going to be at risk, and a lot of land is going to go burn, and we're not used to that here, and out west they are. So those are some of the key points. I'll take questions if there are any. Otherwise, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Bill. So Ed, do you have anything on that, or we can go to the app?
No, Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. So I think we'll get some of your responses to the things we've basically have concerns, which would be the density, traffic, and the water. So I know you've worked on some stuff to bring back to us.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I'd like to just kind of holistically respond to the planning board's suggested site plan with, we took some time to look at it and review, and we have some, comments. So we did hear the planning staff has a few specific areas they'd like to address. The first one that we also heard from the conservation gentleman was regarding impervious area. So while the planning staff's plan might provide some reduction in impervious area, we'll point out here that stormwater has been reviewed and approved by the peer reviewers with some detailed review, and the site is able to adequately capture and recharge stormwater as required. With regard to fire access, the fire access plan, both the secondary access point and the fire trail access point, have been reviewed and approved by Marshfield Fire, and that letter from Deputy Chief Corbo was provided to the zoning board in the past several weeks. With regard to view from the public corridor, we've provided renderings that show the view from Commerce Way, that show minimal visual changes at the front of the site from that public viewpoint. With regard to open space, was a point that was brought up by the architectural peer reviewer. We addressed those comments, we reviewed his input, and we incorporated those comments into the plan. And our plan, as revised, specifically provides more open space and more usable open space for the residents. And I'll note here that the peer reviewer was pleased with those revisions as well. The GATRA bus stop was not brought up in the peer reviews. We are happy to engage with GATRA regarding the possibility of a bus stop on site. in a reasonably sized bus shelter. But we do think that perhaps a bus shelter would be better served at a more central location within Enterprise Park to capture more potential ridership. With regard to water usage and pressure, obviously a topic of a lot of scrutiny and research. We know the town and the DPW has done extensive testing, and I believe the zoning board has been provided a letter from DPW that confirms that water capacity is sufficient for this development, and water pressure is not a concern, and any impacts on water pressure will be imperceptible to neighboring properties. With regard to traffic, similar to the water issue and others, traffic impacts have been studied in great detail and peer-reviewed by the town. It is standard practice for a proposed project to agree to a fair share contribution, and we are prepared to do just that. Finally, we do understand that unit count and density have been a pretty key area of discussion during this whole hearing process. And I think it's important to note here that in context of a 40B, all the issues raised in the peer reviews have been addressed, and there are no issues of health and safety in the proposal that's now before the zoning board. So just to restate, our plan that's been before the zoning board since February has been through multiple rounds of review by the peer reviewers, the town, the zoning board, and various town committees. So we see this process really as an example of a 40B process that's gone as it should, a detailed review with scrutiny, and we think our proposal is better for that process. So I'll pause there and answer any questions.
Okay. Ed, do you have anything based on what Anand said?
So I'll certainly defer to the board members regarding the density question. I appreciate the applicant being willing to look into the GATRA access. I don't recall if Mill Creek built. I don't think they did, but there may be a impromptu bus stop on the Madison Modera site. I just don't know if there is one or not. No, there is not. Okay.
No.
I didn't recall there being one there either. There may in fact be more appropriate to put it on Commerce Way somewhere, but that would require perhaps an easement from someone. If you would like to offer some land that would afford the turnoff for that, you know, a 15-foot deep wide, you know, by 15 feet wide by, say, 50 feet long to allow a bus to pull in off of Commerce, something like that, on your frontage, if it's feasible. Haven't even looked at a plan to even think that, but just that's one idea, unless it's feasible on your property. But I guess it's probably more appropriate if it's out on Commerce Way somewhere, using your point. But we would look to have your update on that later. I went, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I went through all the previous comments and looked at all the outstanding items that either have been deferred for final plans and perhaps as a condition of a possible comprehensive permit, or items that we were waiting for some input on. And so I made a good list, but I never got to type it and send it out today. So I plan to do that so that everybody will have it. But let me go through a couple of the highlights. One is one that we've already identified, and that is a fair share contribution. I'm not sure what that number should be just yet, but at this moment, somewhere around the $96,000 number that's been recommended. The other major traffic item that they agreed to as a condition in their response to comments was that the applicant would agree to design, permit with Mass DOT, and implement signal timing, phasing, and optimization at Route 139 and Enterprise Drive prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy for the first phase. On the site plans itself, there's some requests for site triangles to be added, a signing and striping plan, stop line, stop sign at both access drives, which are now showing the plans, updated parking space total confirmation. On the site plan comment list, a number of things were asked, and you have provided some of those already. Your landscape designer provided several plans for the landscape design that were thoughtful and helpful. I would ask that we add a condition that final plans be provided for review for all site plans and landscape plans, but included in the landscape plan set, I would like to have a photometric plan for record. So I'd like to have your consultant run a photometric plan of what lighting is out there and what the foot candle numbers should be. Make sure that there's no issues there.
Ed, I think we did do that.
I didn't see it in the stack I looked at real quick today, but you did do a lighting plan, you just didn't do a photometric plan. At least I missed it or didn't print it if you did. So perhaps if you have, then that'll be part of the final review.
Sure.
Okay? There's a number of small little items that I had mentioned in letters. Again, I will identify this, like numbering all the buildings for clarity and so on. There was a discussion about earth removal, and I mentioned in my comments that this comprehensive permit would likely have a number of earth removal conditions, a whole separate section on earth removal, like we have done in previous 40Bs, and certainly the previous 40B that was done next door. I will ask that in the next package of final plans, when you get to that point, that you give us the number of truck trips per day, the number of the proposed truck route, and an updated cut and fill analysis based on the revisions that you've given us. Because I have an old cut and fill analysis, approximately 25,000 cubic yards of cut, which is overall not a large amount of cut in terms of timing to remove. And as I recall, the last episode, most of that fill stayed in the park. The fill from the Modera 1 site, we call it Modera 1 for now, Madison. That's most of that stayed in the park. I have no idea if that's the intention. Maybe you can't even predict that today, but that certainly reduced the impact on the roads and the public and so on. Final stormwater O&M plan. The discussion that recently happened that under other fire access, fire trail access for the fire department, you've already covered tonight. Booster pumps and fire flow calculations from your architectural consultants would be needed to be reviewed by the fire department. And the final item is getting your permit for a connection to the water supply. Even though the water supply looks like there is capacity, there was some concern about pressure, which has been addressed with some additional testing. But there was also a request for mitigation, and that was in the form of an irrigation well for the town soccer fields. And I wanted to know if you had decided upon that answer or request, because you're going to get that request from them or get that question from them when you go to approach them for final mitigation. So do you have any kind of response on, or you begun speaking, town engineer, or anyone else about that?
Yeah, about the town ball fields.
So the ball fields, if the ball fields were now given a separate irrigation well paid for by Mill Creek, they will no longer be pulling a demand off of the water system in that area that they currently have in the spring and summer, and that would help benefit the entire water system in that region. And that's one of the mitigation requests that's in writing from the latest memorandum from Mr. Procaccino.
Yes. Thank you, Ed. So yes, we've discussed that internally. So a bit of context is that we drilled irrigation wells for irrigation of Madera Marshfield at a cost of approximately $250,000. So where Madera Marshfield is located is relatively up on a hill. The groundwater is very deep. The ball fields are located across the street at a notably lower elevation, and we would expect that groundwater is accordingly easier to get to and more shallow. We would propose to fund up to that same amount, $250,000, for that irrigation well for the ball fields, with the expectation that it would be, meaningfully cheaper, given the change in elevation and likely easier to access groundwater at that location.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would say that's a pretty fair answer that I would expect the DPW board to accept as well.
Are they here at all, the DPW? Anybody on the line
Anyone
or
from the
anything?
DPW here?
So, I just want to clarify, so the DPW was originally supposed to put in a well in their area for the ball fields originally, and then they want you guys to do it now, and you're proposing that? That's what I heard from the town planner, so that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Yes. I can't speak to what was
I
done
know
before.
you can't, I'm just
but-
asking, that's
but
what
yeah,
your
that's the
proposal
request.
is, to put it with a, I got it.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's my quick list
Okay.
of things that I had out there. that I know that we wanted to talk about and try to get some response on. And at right this moment, I don't have any other questions to ask anyone.
Okay, so now I'm gonna hear from the board, but I know Grover's participating remotely, so I think we should sound off that we're here. Grover, can you hear me?
I'm here.
All right, just want you to identify that you're here and at our meeting.
Rowans is in attendance.
All right. Larry,
Larry Keane here.
Mark Corwin here.
Ryan Murphy here.
Eddie Coleman, yeah.
Brian Sullivan.
All right, so now we'll hear from the board members. Whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one of the things that has been brought up, there's been no concession, it's been a big issue that I've seen is the drain on the schools, and that this project is gonna put right in the specific area of the school. Is there anything you can do to assist with the school, that amount of children that are gonna be going to that location? I mean, I know these numbers, as you say, they're approved, this approved, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, you know? This is a lot to be put on the town, clearly. So where that 282 number that you have there, you're at your bottom line. There's no concession with what Greg brought up, what you just stated yourself. We're there, right?
I'll defer to Paul on the school's question.
Yeah, the proponent's not proposing any mitigation with respect to the schools.
Okay.
As Bob can chime in, that's not one of the areas of health and safety that.
So, excuse me, you just have to speak louder, the people in the back
Oh.
can't hear. Sorry, it's just really
Sorry,
hard.
yeah.
I get it. I totally get
The
it.
proponent's not proposing any mitigation related to the school impacts. Sorry, the proponent is not proposing any mitigation with respect to the school impacts.
You all set? You able to hear him?
So that's just part of the 40B thing. That is not this particular applicant. It's just part of the 40B process. So just to put that out on the table, okay?
And as far as the water goes, so I'll clear with that. The well was already put in for the first project at $250,000.
That's correct.
And you're willing to put up another $250,000 for another well if needed, or to put it in. Is that correct?
We are willing to contribute up to $250,000 for the wells for the town ball fields.
Mm-hmm.
We already plan on installing irrigation wells for our site, so
Okay.
we're not using
Yep.
town water for irrigation.
Yep.
So, well for us, well for the town.
Okay. And the traffic fund, you're in agreement to the $94,000 to $96,000 mark. That's in
Yeah.
agreement, right? And the tree and the landscaping and whatnot, when Ed was talking about having a plan there, that you would be in agreement to put all that in writing, that it stays that way forever, that any trees, I think it was Brian that brought it up last time, any trees or landscaping that needs to be addressed at a later date after your ownership, that it would be there, and that would be put in the language that it stays there forever, correct?
Yes, you're talking, yeah, I think we're talking about landscaping installed on site.
The landscaping, the trees, everything right down to the amount of dumpsters. You're clearly going to do the same thing as the last project. You're going to sell it off. That's fine. That's business, whatever. But you guys have 10 dumpsters there now. 10 years from now, the third owner, someone says, now we can get by with 6 dumpsters. So you put in agreement that the amount of dumpsters there are going to be there forever, correct?
Yeah, I think we have no
Okay.
problem with that.
Yeah, like in the playground, also these kids, there's gonna be a lot of kids there, they're gonna be going across the main drag to get to the school, get to another playground. So any playground that's put there now, again, 10 years from now, it's gonna need to be updated or maintained or replaced, that would be done, correct? You're willing to put all these things, that it stays forever, that it doesn't go away?
Yes, I don't see a particular problem with those things, yes.
Okay.
Yes, long-term
Okay.
maintenance.
Well, I'm just saying, again, right now, it's all, a year from now, it's gonna be all nice and brand new and pretty and everything's good and well, but 10 years from now, a couple different owners later, and we really don't need a playground there anymore. Well, we're gonna need it in writing that there's gonna be a playground there. Or with the trash, with the landscaping, all of the above. All right, yep. As you say, there's been a lot of pushback from the town, from the communities, people that are here tonight. They're the most impacted on it. I don't live far from this project, and I'll tell you, I don't think it's fair to the town at all to come in with this type of proposal, you know? I mean, it is what it is. I understand that. We do have regulations that we need to adhere to, and we're kind of there, but I don't think really anybody's happy about it.
Okay. Thanks for the feedback.
My questions were answered about the water pressure, without putting the town under a microscope. So,
So I have a couple things. Bob, the performance guarantee, if there's any economy issues, like, can you speak to that at all, or?
Well, we typically have conditions like, for example, with earth removal, where we would require the posting of a bond for any damage to the town's
Okay.
streets and ways. We would have a condition that required them to engage in cleanup of the site during construction with trucks that, tend to trail materials in and out, whether during the earth removal phase or the construction phase. This isn't a subdivision. There are not any lots that are released, so we don't really have any infrastructure bond that would typically be imposed. But we would have conditions that say before any commencement of any site work, the following things have to be in place. Before the issuance of any building permit, the following conditions have to be satisfied. Before there's any occupancy certificates, the following conditions have to be satisfied. And prior to the issuance of the last occupancy certificate, the following conditions have to be satisfied. So that's the way we would secure performance.
Okay, so
By
it's,
preventing them from reaching the next milestone before they complete all the items in the earlier milestone.
okay, is there
so-
anything protect us, I'm sorry, if they're, like, if the economy crashes or whatever, and they're in the middle of a project and they can't finish it, like, how does that, I'm just saying, just to protect the town, how does that work?
I don't know much about Mill Creek Residential, but I know one of the entities that had preceded was Trammell Crow Residential. These are national firms.
Right.
They're, deeply capitalized. In a lot of circumstances, they tout themselves as being recession-proof because of their resources. They might slow down if the economy crashes. But they'll have to operate with the confines of the permit that we have.
Okay.
If they don't, they run the risk of us alleging breach
Okay,
and stopping them, slowing them down, which would be worse than anything else that we could do to them.
okay,
I think they'd be in a better position to answer what happens.
I just wanna make sure
in the
we're
event of
covered, that's all.
The economy changes and they can't fulfill it, but I expect that they're gonna build this out, and we're gonna require them, once they commence construction, to complete construction, without stopping and starting, because
Okay.
that's a normal condition for us.
okay. I just want to make sure I put it on the
Those are the
record.
only types of conditions. I mean, any of the financial sums are gonna have to be paid before they are given latitude to do a lot of work on the site.
Okay. So your purchase price for the property, I just want to put this on the record because it was a lot of paperwork in that big binder. So your purchase price of the property is based on the units that you get, or like, how are you determining that? So if you have lesser units that are going to come in, the purchase price that you purchase the property for is going to be less, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we have to come down for various reasons, it wouldn't make it uneconomical for you guys because you're getting the property for a lesser price, and you did make a bundle on the other one next door. So it's not like you're getting slammed, you're paying this really high price, and then you're not having the units to cover it. So that's where we're coming from when we see that kind of a situation.
Right. Well, there's a variety of factors at play here, right?
Yep.
There's the land purchase price, but there's other costs that we incur. For example, the site cost is essentially fixed regardless of the number of units. The wastewater plant cost is essentially fixed regardless of the number of units. There are other major fixed costs that comes along with this site. So I can't speak to that point specifically, but the project as proposed, again, has been reviewed by the peer reviewers in detail, and there are no health and safety issues with the project as proposed.
So, well, we understand and we appreciate our peer reviews. As the board, we do get to make our recommendations as well. And we do have our input that should be considered. And we do hear from the peer reviewers, but we also have our own opinions on things based on our selectmen, our planning board.
Can everyone just speak up? The audience can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. So based on our select board, our planning board, our conservation commission, there's a lot of boards in town, and the public. So for me, I feel like this has gone, you feel as though it's been exhausted. We had 14 meetings for Madeira. We've had 7. So for me, having been on Modera, I think this is rushed. I think there's a lot of things that we haven't covered. I don't know how many handicap spaces they're going to be, because I don't know where the parking place is. I don't think that the tot lot should be where that it is. I think it should be up the other things, because as a property manager for many, many years, I don't think that's a very good place in between two buildings, two townhouse buildings. I don't think it's a good idea, and the safety with the thing, I just don't think it is. So there's a number of issues here that I think that, and that you're perfectly well within your rights to think that this is all wrapped up and it's great, but, you know, as a board member and having been on, what's my fourth 40B, third or fourth 40B, I feel as though this one is kind of rushed, and I feel as though 530 units with what you want versus what we have next door is a lot on the town. I feel as though that not taking into consideration the fire trail, I just think that a little bit more consideration needs to be in, and I do think that some careful time and thought, and not that you guys haven't put your time in, but I think you're doing it based on, well, we got this done, so now we have this, and it should be like the same thing, because words similar to that were made on one of the earlier meetings. So, for me, we haven't gone through any of the waivers. I just feel like there's a lot of missing pieces here. I don't know where the parking lots, I don't know, we haven't clarified the affordability, that Marshfield has preference, like, we haven't gone over a lot of stuff. So, for me to just say like, oh, 282, yeah, it's great, I'm uncomfortable with that, for various reasons. For safety, which is health, is safety. And having that many units, having a potential fire next door, I think that's an issue. I think that the fire exit should be closer to the other side and come straight down. It makes more sense, and the fire chief said, it was specifically asked to him, and he had no issue with it at all. It could be either one, he just needed a second one, so it didn't have to be in the middle. So to clarify that. I just feel as though the town planner's layout is better for Marshfield. And do you have as many units? No. But you have more units than they have next door for the amount of land that they have. I'm going to review a couple more things, but somebody else is there.
Brian, do you have anything?
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Sullivan. I'm kind of new to Marshfield, but I was in Situate for 50 some odd years before I moved here a few years ago. And I was on the zoning board in Situate for about 20 years, give or take. I've been through about 9 of these godforsaken 40B hearings, and I hate 40B. It's terrible. It's an absolutely abysmal law. But you know what? It's the only law that's on the books. It's the only thing that gets affordable housing built in the state. Because everybody wants affordable housing. And everybody says, you know what? We need more affordable housing. My kids can't buy a house in this town. So we need affordable housing. But you know what? This lot right here, where this 40B is, that's not a good lot. Over there, on the other side of town, that's where the 40B should be. But not here. And what happens is, I've seen it, again, I was just making some notes, I think I've done 9 of these. Every single time, people come out and they say, we need it, but not here. And what happens is, in my experience in Situate, is we started out and we just said no. Okay, great. Tough luck, we're not going to approve it. And we had an inverse Perry Mason record. We lost every single case that we said no to. We wised up. And with all due respect to our esteemed counsel, we paid a lot of money for lawyers to lose. And then we realized if we're paying for a lawyer, maybe the best way to do this is to get the best deal possible for the town and to work with the applicant to negotiate, to get them to pay $250,000 for a well that's not even on their property. For kids, maybe some of the kids that live there will be playing soccer on those nicely watered fields. Maybe they won't. But to work with the developer to get the best deal possible. And I know nobody wants to hear this, but the way these folks have worked with this, and it took 7 meetings because maybe the 14, they got bludgeoned on the 14, so maybe 7 was better than the 14.
I disagree.
They streamlined the process. They figured things out. I don't know because I wasn't at those hearings. But what I've seen with everything is that these folks have tried to work with the town. They've adopted virtually every recommendation of the consultants. It's a terrible project. I don't like it. I wish it was just open space. But the reality is I don't own the land, so I can't tell them what to do with it. They own it, and they can develop it, and they've reduced by a magnanimous 18 the number of units that they're going to put in. Oh, please, hold on to your seats. Yeah, it's not great, but they've addressed everything that they've been asked to address. Fire chief is on board. Water, less of an issue, even less of an issue because they're putting in this pump over on the ball field. If they put in this GATRA bus shelter, that'll probably lessen the traffic impacts. I say we whack them for the 40 grand a year. We make it a condition. Are they going to fight over 40 grand a year? Probably not. They're gonna pony up the 96 grand for the traffic impact. We're gonna do some horse trading. But the idea is we can't just say no. And I read the letters from all these folks, Valenti, Kazarian, Bulmer, Bongialotti, the Jack McCarthy, Woodbury, Scott, Gasper, Lewis, my old coach, football coach, Mr. Ellsworth. And, I appreciate the concern, and I appreciate that this is not ideal. You're right. And until the town, and it's not just Marshfield, it's across the state, until towns take seriously the mandate of building affordable housing before these folks, and no offense to you folks, before these folks come in and ram it down the town's throat, if the towns take building affordable housing seriously, it takes 40B off the table. But towns don't want to do it. You know why? Because this spot isn't a good spot for affordable housing. Nobody wants it next door. So, again, I love Marshfield. I'm grateful to live here. I'm happy to serve on the board. I know a little bit about zoning, and I know a little bit about 40B. And my experience is saying no is not the answer. The best way to approach this is, as the board has done, you get competent people to give you competent advice, you listen to their recommendations, and you hammer the developer, and you get the best deal for the town that you can. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Brian. I hope I didn't offend anybody.
Grover, do you have anything to say?
I agree with what everyone else has said so far. I think the GATRA thing is an absolute necessity. The amount of people that are going to be in that area, I mean, how many cars will be in and out of there each day? Thinking about GATRA that goes by my house down towards Grant Rock, you could take the bus to the beach there. There's no parking down there to go to the beach anyway, so it's actually could be a good thing for the town. Good thing for the people that live there. Everyone wants to be able to access that part of town. So I think the GATRA is a necessity to have up that way. I was also concerned about the sharp increase in run volume for the fire department. They have, I don't have the exact numbers. I know from last year, they were up like within 4 months. They had been to Modera 70 times or something like that. And that's a huge increase from what they have. And they cut staffing, and that affects our town. If you or your neighbor calls 911, but both ambulances that run in the town have gone to this place already, then you're getting an ambulance from the surrounding town, and then it just snowballs from there. And during the summer, I mean, we had many different ambulances from many different communities in this town, which delays response time. So, I mean, it is not ideal. The project's too big in my opinion, but like everyone else has said, it's kind of, we don't really have much of a choice here. We can get what we can out of it, and that's that. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I kind of agree with what Bill said. There's not much we can do. Let's get what we can out of it, and I think we've done a good job so far. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is Fire Chief Simpson still on here?
I am.
Just making sure that everything that was said in here tonight you agree with? On your,
It's not that I agree with it. What I'm looking at is the information that I've been handed, and I look at everything from a code perspective, fire safety and a code perspective. I asked the developer to meet a certain set of conditions, which I would for any developer in town, and it was difficult, but they were able to meet those conditions. I'm a resident in this town as well. I don't like it any more than anybody else. But when I ask for certain conditions to be met, and they meet those conditions, it's a difficult situation for me to argue.
okay. Thank you. Andrew, do you have anything to add, or? I don't want to leave you out.
Like I said in my written comments, there's really nothing from a zoning officer standpoint that I could say. Again, my only comments would be really to the building aspect of it. To echo what Attorney Galvin said, I don't think that, I do believe that this company is quote unquote recession proof. I don't believe that there will be a financial aspect. I believe they made out pretty well in the last one, and expect the same on this one. As far as building goes, the last one was constructed during the pandemic. It was a really tough build. That the company was amazing at developing COVID protocols, safety protocols. It was really good to work with them. They did everything according to code. They called us for all the inspections. They worked really well with our department as far as meeting all those requirements. So as far as being good stewards of the site, they were great stewards of the site and did a good job meeting all of the conditions that the ZBA set forth on the prior special permit for the 40B for the first Modera project. So I don't have any, from a building commissioner perspective, I don't have any issues with the way they conduct business, or I don't have any potential pitfalls that I see would happen. And I'm not a resident of this community, so I don't have any opinion as to whether or not they put a 40B here.
Okay, thank you. Cliff, if you're still on there, do you have anything to add?
I do. I do have a few comments, and thanks for asking. I think what I would say is that I just want to correct, I think, a couple of impressions. I think the fact that, I'm the architectural peer reviewer, and I would say, as I have expressed, that the project has moved in the direction that I've suggested. Do I think it's the perfect design solution? I don't, and I think, though, that at the same time, looking at the plan that was submitted recently, the kind of very conceptual plan that was submitted, as Greg discussed earlier, it does shed light, I think, on, actually, if we stick on this plan, don't go back to Greg's plan, stick on this one just for a moment, but I think it does, as any design process does, it sheds light on other options. And I think there are some things to learn from this. I think the bus stop is one, more pervious surface is another. There is the suggestion of significantly decreasing the number of units, which I have reviewed all the materials that have come in since our last discussion, and it's huge. I mean, the number of reactions to the density of the project is as many as I've ever seen. And all these things are worth, I think, thinking about. And I'm sympathetic with, was it Ms. Conway who was talking about it being a bit rushed?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm sympathetic with that. If I were, and I think it is kind of my role to help the town get the best possible project. If I could dictate the process, and I think if the developer were receptive, I would encourage them to look a little deeper at satisfying some of the concerns or suggestions that are inherent in the sketch plan that the town did, but a lot of the, or that the planning department did, as well as a lot of the comments that we have heard. So while I agree that I don't think there's been any smoking gun of health and safety issues, I do think there are some changes that could be made to the plan that I certainly thought of in light of looking at the, having more time to think about it and looking at the suggested sketch plan. I think there are some options that could really significantly improve the site plan without necessarily, it would be a hot button for the developer, without necessarily cutting as many units as the planning board plan did. And the reason I asked you to keep this this plan up is I think if you just look at the improvement to the plan, I'll make a quick comment on the planning department plan, which is I think one issue that I have with it is that it sort of monopolizes the open space relative to the townhouse units. And I think when you look at this plan, there still is a sense that the usable outdoors is kind of residual space. And if the developer were receptive, I would encourage them to look at consolidating green space in a way that it's more of an organizing element for the plan as opposed to being leftover space in areas that would be difficult to develop as buildings, which is why those buildings that were eliminated. They were awkwardly sited in a space that really could minimally handle them. But I think a very quick adjustment that can be made to this plan that I think would be far less draconian would be eliminating the continuing where they were going by the elimination of those townhouse buildings, by eliminating the C2 building, so that you really do have a continuous sort of L-shaped green space that can be used equitably by the larger apartment buildings as well as the townhouse buildings. And that would be a loss of 37 units, which is significantly less than I think the number of units that would be lost in the planning department's suggestion. So just in case I'm meandering a bit too much, I think my recommendation to the board is if it is possible to have a working session where there's a less formal environment for processing some of these ideas and really perhaps adjusting priorities a little bit. But I think that's where I'm at, is there were improvements made, no question, but I think it is clear that the site is certainly as dense as possible. I think right now it reads a bit as a kind of bedroom community because it is dependent on off-site outdoor space, which I think is great. It's wonderful that all of that space is available. But I would encourage the developer to consider working a site plan that really has a little more coherence as a neighborhood. It's a big enough development that it is a kind of small neighborhood. And I think looking at considering it as a kind of village and thinking of consolidating open space in a way that it becomes the organizing element, perhaps in between the townhouse buildings and the larger apartment buildings. So I think that's my suggestion. I think what I learned from the planning department is there are many other options to look at. I do think you can achieve much of what the planning department suggestion did achieve, and I think you can achieve it with the loss of fewer units than what is cooked into that plan.
Thank you, Cliff.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a
Sure.
quick question before we depart? Is Chief Simpson still there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, this is Ed Pesci. Real quick, Chief, there's been a lot of talk about fire access, and I know your recent email, August 29th, explained that a fire road in the event of a forest fire, right, that email. Well, I'm not sure if it's that email or not, but looks like a fairly, there we go. Thank you, Andrew. I just want to make sure we understand, on the plan, that the most recent revision, there is a connecting gravel access to the existing fire trail along the northern end of the site. It's the northeast side of the site. So, Andrew, if you could point to that for everyone in the northeast corner, northeast, top of the site. So right there,
Right there.
right, no,
Almost there, right there.
right there.
Nope.
Nope, down, keep coming down.
Nope.
Right there,
Yeah.
right there. So that's an existing trail, and I wanted to just confirm, because I heard conservation talking about, and planning talking about southern accesses and crash gates and fencing and so on. There are other trails on the southern end, so if you would zoom down or move down to the southern end, Andrew, do you need to have, there's one on the right and one on the left. So do you keep panning further south? There you go. Nope. Bring it up. No. Go. There you go. No. Move to the left, so everybody can see. Nope. The other way.
The other left. The other left.
Well, pan to the left means sometimes the other direction. Go to the other direction. Thank you. Too far. Yeah. But there's another trail in the south, on the right there in the southern right side. Move your cursor to the right, Andrew.
I see it.
Right, and then there's another one on the left, right there. Do you need access there as well? I'm going to need to ask you to confirm that when the final plans come through, but I wanted to just make sure while you're here. I was going to ask you that, but now that you're here.
My answer is it would be preferable. It would make our lives a lot easier. We have equipment that can get in there, but that would make life a lot easier in the event of a large forest fire.
Okay, so we would ask the applicant to just make some kind of site plan accommodation for emergency access there.
We can try to do that. I'll just mention that we did discuss this with the chief, maybe with the deputy chief, and I understand that there's another access point off to the west through an existing cul-de-sac. So we can look at that, but we did discuss it, and my understanding is there's other access to that southern fire trails. But we do hear the comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that it?
All set.
You have anything, Bob? Heidi?
So I just want to clarify for the record. I don't think any of our board is against a 40B. So I actually happen to be in favor of 40Bs. Marshfield, Duxbury, Pembroke, I don't care where they are. Do I like the way they have to do them? No. But I think that they're very good. And being in the housing market, I think it's necessary. We have a lot of people that don't have housing. So whatever we can do to help that is necessary. But I do think that it needs to be conditioned considerably. And I do think that the lesser units and the less density is a more favorable thing for Marshfield, and a cleaner site is more favorable to Marshfield on resources, safety-wise, right across the board. I'm not saying, and I did not say, that you have not done your homework and you have not done it thoroughly and you have not done it well. That was not on the table at all. I'm just saying, as a board member, I feel as though 14 meetings versus 7, it was rushed. There's a lot of things that we did the last time that have not been discussed, have not been laid out, we have not reviewed, and that's not something that you can streamline. So I just want to put that on the table, that for clarification, because that seems to be necessary right now.
With respect to the process, so I think we're seeking to have the meeting closed because we don't feel there's more information to be provided to the board, but there will be additional time for the board to deliberate after we close the meeting.
I'm aware how it works, yeah, I get it.
And also, we have to close the meeting by September 8th for our time frame. frame
Or
anyway.
we would need an extension.
We would need an extension.
So we don't
from
have to,
there.
or we would need an extension.
Yes.
So I guess my issue is, we had working meetings before, we have not had them. So those are some of the things that we've had to go over, a lot of the items. So Mr. Hubbard did it with town council and Deb and her team and in the peer review. So I think that those things, those pieces for me is making it feel rushed. We've heard everything from everybody. Some things we agree with, some things there's just nothing we can do about it, but we still understand where everybody's coming from. So I just want to make it clear that we realize the work that's gone in. We realize the expense that's gone into everything. But at the end of the day, our job is to protect the town and the people that live here and to try to do the right thing. So that's where I'm coming from 100%.
So I would ask, with the items brought up tonight, do you feel that if an extension was needed for time, you would want to do that? Or do you feel that you've answered adequately everything that's been put before you?
Yeah, I think we might ask for a little bit of time to circle up as a group.
Okay.
Just to talk about everything we've heard tonight.
All right.
It's okay
So I
to take
think,
a quick recess.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. We're going to have a recess, take a 5-minute break. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Mark Corwin, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
We're just going to take a 5-minute break. Heidi?
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Grover?
Corvanzi, aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 5-minute break. So, you guys had a chance to talk? How do you
Yes.
feel about an extension for time?
So, I'll cover a few things, because we've heard a fair bit of input tonight. So I'll cover a few things and come to an extension also.
Talk a little louder, we can't hear that.
Yes. I want to first, obviously, thank the board for the feedback tonight and acknowledge, all the work that's gone into the process and the project to this point. I'll cover a few things that we heard so far. And our goal here is to acknowledge the suggestions that have been brought forth, and again, try to accommodate where we can and make gestures where we can to improve the project. So we heard tonight about GATRA and the suggestion to find a spot for a bus stop. Our experience at many such projects like this across Massachusetts and elsewhere is that public transit does not get a lot of use for garden projects in the suburbs like this. That said, we are absolutely willing to work with GATRA to find a spot for a bus pull-off or stop or shelter. And we would propose to offer a fair share contribution to GATRA based on ridership. As regards the fire access in the south corner, the issue we have, really, we want to be accommodating to the fire department with their requests. The issue we have is, if you look at this plan, we show a retaining wall in that southwest corner, and the purpose, as we develop the grading here, among other things, what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of export material that we have on site. So to convert that retaining wall into a connection point would result in a lot of new export material. If we were just to make that a connection at grade, we then have to lower the rest of the site, which results in a net export. So what we would suggest is, we know that the parcel to the south is an unknown owner. We would propose to work to identify who is the owner of that parcel and obtain a grading easement to work across that site and not affect the cut fill analysis that's been prepared to date, but instead do a little bit of grading onto that southern parcel and create that access that the fire chief suggested. We We've also heard a lot of comments about density. Acknowledging again that the plan that's been proposed has been through a lot of review and analysis, and really every line of this page has gone through a lot of thought by our staff, engineers and designers, as well as the peer review and the board. So we are in a position to suggest a removal of an additional 12 units, which combined with the previous removal is a total of 30 or 10%, which is a significant reduction from our previous proposal. Finally, coming to the request for an extension, it's our view that there is no new information to be provided as part of this hearing. We're not in a position to provide additional time, but we hope that these gestures will help the board in making its decision.
So, yes, we'll hear from you, Ed.
Mr. Chairman, just through you to Anand, the southern access, Andrew, could you zoom in on the southern access a little bit to show the retaining wall? So there's a access left and there's access right, east and west, right? And there's a retaining wall on the east, but no retaining wall on the right. You'd lose a couple spaces, or at least one parking space, trying to get that access to be provided, but it doesn't have the grading problem that you're referring to. I'm not saying there's no grading problem, I'm just saying it's less of a grading problem. At least that would provide one access, that would at least provide some support in the southern area for the fire chief. So I would say that I understand your argument left, or on the east side, and if you can get, and I support the fact that you'll try getting access from that owner for a grading easement, great, but on the right, I would ask that your future plans reflect an access with a crash gate, so-called fire access gate there as well.
Yeah.
I also would like you to, notwithstanding what you're already offering, which, working out a location for a GATRA bus stop and a fair share contribution to be computed in some manner that's fair and reasonable. There's been some discussion about fencing along the east and south, and the commission wanted to try to prevent, the Conservation Commission was concerned about access due to fire and other inappropriate access for dumping and what have you, I'd imagine, but have you talked at all about that? I know you've only learned or discussed this briefly today.
We haven't really discussed it. I would propose that eliminating that access path is probably the simplest way to keep people from walking into the woods and dumping stuff.
The access path from Commerce.
From Commerce Way, yeah, which is what we're proposing to do.
And, right, and then providing at least an access trail, perhaps with a gate. I don't know if it'll require a gate or not. It's not entirely clear to me whether the fire chief needs that or not, but I would leave that open as an open option along with the southern trail, that you'll provide fire access in those two areas, right?
Yes, I think that's fair, and without the grading in front of me, I can't say for certain, but it certainly does look like that on the eastern side at the south looks like it should be able to work.
Okay. Could you just, for the benefit of the board, you threw out a number of 10 units. Can you, thank you, Andrew.
12.
You threw out a number to the board. I thought I heard 10.
10%.
I'm
10.
sorry.
Yeah.
My mistake. 12 units. Can you show us what building you were referring to do that, so we understand a little bit how the site plan may change?
So we haven't thought too much about exactly where we would make that change. I think we would propose to make that change in one of the front 3 flats buildings.
Okay. How many units are in a 3-unit townhouse building? Is it 12?
It's 12.
It's 12. So you'd either change one whole set of 3 or whatever combination works out for you, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the three large flats buildings. behind the clubhouse, not the townhome buildings, the
Oh,
flat
sorry,
buildings. Yeah.
sorry.
Rectangular buildings.
So you do something in those larger rectangular buildings to reduce, either in one building or all three of those buildings, a total of 12 more units?
Some combination, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Bob, on the time we have to answer this by being the 8th of September, is that
We have to close the public hearing before the 8th of September.
before the 8th of September? So if we wanted another meeting, it would have to be the 7th? Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
Greg, do you want to comment?
Nancy, is that the date?
I think it's right, Chuck.
I got the wrong date. I got the 6th, but you can't meet
I
on
think the select.
on a voting day. They're here on the 7th, so we'd have to look.
Zoning board can't by law meet on election day.
Right, so we would have to look at the 7th.
Okay, is that within the time frame? I don't know the filing.
The day before.
It's the day before.
But I don't know if this room is available.
No, it's not, so we'd have to use either the library or Sesberg.
Bob, I actually think it's 180 days brings you to September 4th.
No, September 4th.
That's why I'm asking.
Well, then that helps.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to kind of.
If that's the case, we're meeting Thursday.
March 8th,
Kidding.
right, our first meeting, but.
Two-day
Right?
meeting.
Isn't that our first meeting? It's open?
So that's a Sunday. Days away. So it is September 4th?
Yeah, I just want to check my math, but 180 days is the requirement from March 8th.
Okay.
That brings you to September 4th.
Okay, September. All right, so there's that answer. So does anyone else have anything from the board? If not, I'm gonna go to the audience. Cliff, do you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay.
Again, I think it's interesting to think about where those 12 units would come from to provide the most benefit to the site plan. I certainly agree it should come from the larger apartment buildings. But I have to think about it. It certainly would be worth looking at what they're proposing. Again, what I was trying to do with the idea of that elimination of that one building was creating enough open space so that the open space is really the organizing element. And I think that applicant could make a much better argument that they're providing an appropriate amount of on-site usable outdoor space.
Okay, thank you, Cliff.
So if
Mr.
the,
Chairman, it's September 4th.
September 4th.
so if we close it, then whatever you're proposing to what building or whatever, like, we can't take that information in anymore, right? 'Cause
That's it.
we
No,
won't
would
know.
have to- Yeah, we would have
Right?
to.
That's no information.
No more information, so we wouldn't know where you're proposing it, we just have to kind of go sight
It'll
unseen?
be a condition.
Doesn't seem to make much sense.
All right, so now I'm gonna hear from the audience. Now, let me just be clear on this. I only want new information, nothing that we've reviewed in the past. Okay, thank you.
I would just like to help Mr. Sullivan. The letters that we wrote, not one letter said we were against 40B. We all said we understand it, we need it, we want it, but we don't want the numbers of 282. We are more comfortable with the Great Eagles number. So maybe we could read those letters because he threw our names out there. Also, I want to just make sure when they reduce the number of units, they're not increasing the number of bedrooms, so that we end up with, the same amount that we had the last time. I'm the one who has been impacted by the water. We've had 2 tests done, both started low and then lower. And even though it says it's acceptable, it might be acceptable to the engineer, but it's really tough if you're
For you.
doing the cooking and trying to fill a pot with water and you're waiting for a pot. So, yeah, the showers too, yes.
Do you know what the PSI was on the tests?
I don't remember, no, because he was talking with my husband. He was-
Mr. Chairman, did you get the name and
Oh,
address?
sorry.
It's Maureen O'Malley, 12
Right on
Old
that.
Woodlock Lane. And also, the point I just wanted to make was putting the well in for the ball fields. The water is still our water, so it's just unaccounted for versus, it wouldn't count to as the $5 million, 5 million gallons a day that we've hit. It would just be, we wouldn't know what number we would use. So if the water is coming out of the ground, there's no meter that's counting how much water is coming out for the ball fields. It's still town water.
Right, we are still using our town water, but
So I
it's
just
not
wanted
coming
to-
through our system, so
Right.
that adds, that gets us more volume in our pumps.
Right, but it's still.
It's still
a
town
division
water,
of
I understand what that is.
Yeah.
It just doesn't put
And also.
pressure on the system.
Was it ever explained to us how they originally came up with 300 units, where that number came from?
I could ask the applicant. I don't
Please.
recall, but
I don't,
I don't think anybody started with the number 300. They started with designing the site, and that's what resulted.
in the result of the site.
it's a design question, not a unit count question.
Greg?
I believe in the DHCD handbook, it identifies communities by size. Our size community, 300 is the largest units that you can approach the town with.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, so density was never part of the equation. It was just, here's the maximum, and this is what we're going for.
That's not
Well,
what anybody said.
No, that's
Maybe
what
that's what Greg is implying, or you're implying, but that is not.
That's what I'm asking.
That is not the way we design.
Okay, so you just threw out a number of buildings on this half size of what phase one was.
No, ma'am, we designed the site based on the site itself. We did not just throw out a number of buildings. We did not just throw out a number of units.
But you just
Carefully
said we
designed.
designed, and I'm asking, how did you come to this 300? And how did you decide so many townhouses, so many apartments, so many one, so many two, so many three-bedroom? How did you come to that?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, that's
in a
fine.
public hearing. Mill Creek is a multi-million-dollar business with professionals, both in-house and outside.
But you have to present this to the state, right?
And this, yes, we presented it
So-
to the state in order to get the project eligibility letter, which they reviewed. They reviewed the project and issued the letter saying that this site plan was appropriate for the site. Then it only comes to the board after that.
Can you show this to Brian?
Okay. And are there any 4 stories that are coming into this, or is it all 3 and lower?
All the buildings are 3 stories, some with basement.
So
3 stories.
with a basement. How many have basements?
3.
Is the basement at ground level?
The basement what?
At ground level? Or is it walking?
It's a walkout basement.
It's defined in the building code, so. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, and just my last comment, Andrew had said about how well phase 1 went. I had a number of issues, and Nancy can attest to my showing up a number of times at her office trying to find out who to speak to. The fence that they put around the property went all the way out to the street. You weren't allowed access to the sidewalks. The hydrants were on the inside of those fences, so the fire department couldn't have accessed them. There were trucks that were as tall as I was, taking fill in and out of there, and you were trying to walk on the street because there are no other sidewalks. So there were no detailed police there to stop cars that were trying to go around, and you were trying to pass the trucks. So there were issues, but I'll get Andrew's number for phase 2.
Okay. Is that it?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Name and, yeah.
17 Snowy Owl Lane. You had said that you were going to be putting in elevators in some of the buildings. How many of the buildings?
All the flats buildings will have elevators.
All the flats buildings?
All the flats buildings,
All
the apartment buildings.
And how many, those are the 3 stories are going to have
Yes.
elevators?
Yeah.
So the 2 stories, no.
The townhomes do not have elevators.
Town.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, was the gas...
Name and
Oh, I'm
address for the
sorry.
record.
My name is John Sullivan, 1 Weathering Lane. Is the gas problem taken care of? I understand that Madison is heated by gas, and plus they have to use diesel oil for the pumps for the sewage treatment plant. And I'm just thinking this would be added on to the gas. I'm thinking if we have a cold spell, will that slow down our gas coming to our place? And also, I talk with a lot of residents. I do a lot of walking up
Yeah.
in that area, and one of their problems with the Madison is heat, especially up in the top floors. They have a heating problem up there. And I was wondering, is there enough gas in the area to supply the Madison and this property here?
Have you got an answer from
Address that?
Eversource or?
We have not. We normally reach out to Eversource for a will serve letter at the appropriate time.
Okay. And there's nothing that leads you to believe there'll be a gas problem in there?
Not that we know of.
Shortage or?
That's correct.
So there's no gas problem?
They don't know of anyone right now, but they haven't reached out to Eversource yet. So. I know the question came up for the senior center on Webster Street. That's on the other side of town. I believe that where we receive it is right behind this project, so. Do you have anything else?
No, I just hope that we have enough gas if there's a cold spell.
Yes.
So I guess there is going to be enough gas.
Well, I think Eversource won't allow them to connect to it. Eversource won't allow them to connect to it if there's not.
Okay.
They didn't allow the senior center to connect to it.
So what will happen if there isn't enough gas? We'll have to use propane tanks.
That'll be up to,
And I think that should be addressed.
that'll be up to the developer, the applicant. Go ahead.
Yes, just a couple of questions. if I
Name and
may.
address?
Dennis Shatnoff, 43 Snowy Owl Lane, at Highland Green. I guess a couple of different things. One is, we've met as a resident group, and more of a question, I guess, in that, and was it Mr. Sullivan, I'm sorry, that read the letters or named the letters?
I just wanted the folks that sent letters to know that I had read their
Oh,
letters,
that's
yes.
okay. But we agree that they didn't object to any 40B issue.
None of the letters that I read, did anybody say they were opposed to affordable housing?
Okay.
Nobody said that. And if I indicated
Yeah.
that those letters said that, I apologize. That was not
No,
in those letters.
That's fine.
When I said that in my past experience, I was referring to a different town, not to Marshfield.
Number of units, the question is, why wouldn't we consider, given that the Modera one was, the density is 11 units per acre, roughly, why wouldn't we consider using that same figure for the new development? So based on the acreage, 11.2 units times 12 acres would be about 135 units.
Yeah, we've asked this question several times. Debbie's answered it before. I mean, if you'd like, I could have her answer it again, but
I don't recall any. Do you remember an answer to this thing?
they were
If you
allowed.
prefer not to answer it, then
No,
we'll.
Debbie can answer it. She's answered this question before.
Okay.
It's
I don't recall her
don't know if I've answered that specific
No, I
question
don't think she
before, but I
has.
think we have collectively answered the question of why we think this is a good site plan, as is having nothing to do with that calculation or any other calculation. Frankly, this is a site plan that we designed with the site in mind and with the business of operating these kinds of developments all around Massachusetts and all around the country, frankly.
But you also said that the prior development doesn't have any impact on the new development. They're
Prior
each
impact
individual
has nothing to do, we'll
project.
have different investors.
You said each project that you do has a different,
Each project states that each project is individually designed, looked at, each site is different. This was not built on taking into consideration the first phase. If, I know that maybe it was interpreted that we were coming in thinking that we would just piggyback onto that because we had done that design and we had done that project. And we have referenced that project in terms of quality of building, in terms of how we think about design, how we think about management, how we think about the impact on the community and the impact on the residents, but they're completely separate projects.
thank you.
We're coming from the perspective of the community, because we are the community. And so that number, 135, and I suspect, someone comes in high, someone comes in low, you settle in the middle, I don't know if that's where this is going. But traffic, the less units, the better the traffic scenario. So that's why we were wondering whether or not that would make sense to consider using the same density calculation. I understand funding sources for one is different than the other. Just curious as to why that isn't being considered.
I can tell you as a board, we've asked that question from the beginning, and I did my own math, Bernie corrected me on it, but we've asked that question from the start about the density and the comparison in the two projects. But from what Debbie's told us in the past is that each project is done on its own merit and goes to the state and gets either their approval to come to us, and that's what they did with both of them.
You're not understanding my question, and maybe I'm not articulating it correctly. We're the community, so using the 135 helps mitigate the traffic-related issues that we know are going to be a problem. And we were wondering why that isn't a potential criteria as much as 282 is.
So can I just ask, what's
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
135? I'm confused.
If you take the number of units per acre in Modera 1,
Oh, okay.
that's what, 11?
Isn't it
11.2,
12.6? I thought it was 12.6. Isn't it 12.6?
He's just doing the math. and
Oh, I'm
saying-
like, I just didn't know where 135, I'm like, did I miss that whole meeting? So I'm like,
It's comparing the density
Right.
per acre
Right.
of both
I
projects.
get, I just don't have the same math that you
We've
do.
done
Okay.
this several times along the road
I
here.
was just wondering where the 135
I'm just
was.
letting
I
him
don't
know.
have the same math that he does. Okay. Okay, I got it now.
Go ahead.
Dennis Keller, 19 Snowdale. One of the things, I mean, obviously, when you're doing business, you're going to try to maximize the amount of money that you can make. Everyone knows that. That's what business is all about. So if there were 300 on the site itself, that there was approved by the state and put forward by them, it's a maximum. It's not a minimum. Okay? And that's something I think we have to concern ourselves with, because we all know in the past, and Mr. Sullivan said he's not happy with any of these 40Bs and the effect it's going to have on them. So, and that's not something that's new. I think that what we have to do, we're not against 40B, but what we are asking for is for people to look at the scale of the project based on the neighborhood and what's going to benefit the town and not benefit the town, costs and so forth, and the downstream costs that go with it. One of the things that I wrote in there, and Mr. Sullivan didn't mention my name, was we know just across the street, which I think is important, is you can have a school for autism. They've already clear cut that entire area. From what I understand, they're gonna be building a baseball field across the way, or a field behind the School for Autism. More importantly, at the corner of Proprietor's Way and Old Woodlot, they're gonna have a daycare center, but we also found out that in the plan that they're offering now is they wanna have a preschool. So that entire area is gonna change. Okay, everything is gonna change. And I understand the permitting went from up on the hill all the way down to Plain Street back in 1997. So you say to yourself, I think we have to look at the plan as far as that entire neighborhood. And what I brought up once before is you got the Boys and Girls Club right down there, enormous amount of traffic, especially during the summer. You're gonna have a daycare center, a preschool, and around the corner you're gonna have kids who are disabled children in that neighborhood. And they really have to look at the traffic. And what happens, I've been living here since 1986. Every time we've done a traffic study, it's always done at the low point during the course of the year. I've seen it over and over again. Where I lived before, been through all these board meetings and so forth, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, but I think we have to we have to moderate this thing. We have to come to a conclusion that's fair and honest to everyone, especially in the neighborhood and for the whole town, because we're part of it. We pay taxes. We live there. We know they're gonna clear cut that entire hill. It's gonna change the entire visibility of the neighborhood. And we're in a place 55 and older, so we're seniors. And is there any consideration for that? You know, the seniors living nearby, that when we walk down the street, if they take up the sidewalks, we're gonna have a problem too. So there are safety issues, and I don't think the traffic study, when it was done looking at it from the standpoint school year and summers. That did not happen, if I'm not mistaken. So I think we have to look at that, because you're talking about safety of kids. Listen, I'm not that old, I'm 76, but I'm still walking on that street a lot. So is my wife, okay? And I look at it and all my neighbors. So I say, let's look at it and be reasonable about what we're trying to do to protect everything in that area. If you went up there today, it's completely clear cut. All the way down to the Boys and Girls Club. I talked to those people. You know what they said? They never knew what was happening. No one ever notified them, and they were abutters because of the big permit that went through in 1997. They didn't have to do that. Conservation didn't have to go in there, couldn't go in there because it was already permitted. But the usage of that entire area is going to change.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We understand change, and we understand that people want to make money. Believe me, my brother built more hotels around the United States than probably anybody else, been before boards. And I look at it as, there's a certain amount of money the business has to make, and I get it. But you can't capitalize by maximizing. It's just not the right thing to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Go ahead. Name and address.
Bernie Dupuy, 6 Weathervane Lane. I wonder if someone could put the map up that was there about the development.
Andrew, can you put the plan up?
Site plan?
Yeah, site plan. I guess maybe I need better prescription in terms of my glasses, because when I'm looking at this, I heard someone talking about open space, and all I'm seeing is building, 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 parking, 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 building, 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 parking, where's the open space in this? I'm missing it. And I don't know, I had a recent prescription for my glasses, but even up close and personal, I'm still not seeing that open space. Where is it? Am I missing it? Is someone show me on this map where it is? Because I'm missing it. Number one, okay? Number two, we talked about the letter from the water department. I've got a copy of that letter. Town's water management withdrawal authorized the town to 3.3 million gallons per day. for the entire month of July, we were using about 5 million gallons of water per day. Meaning the town is right now in violation, am I correct? In terms of what we're supposed to be doing? 5 million gallons a day, we're supposed to be at 3.3. So let's solve that problem by putting a new, bigger development in there that's gonna use even more water. Does that make sense? Again, I'm missing the boat here. It doesn't make a bit of sense to me. I'm not against this project. I am against some of the things I'm hearing coming up like tonight. One of the trade-offs would be put in a new well for that's going to tap into the water field for watering ball fields. Mr. Pesci, at the last time we had a meeting, asked me on my way out, was I a former science teacher? Because I seem to have a lot of facts, right, Mr. Pesci?
Yes, sir.
And my response is, no, I'm a math teacher who does his homework. Well, I do my homework. I've studied a little bit about aquifers, and I'm going to give you a very brief lesson, if you will, less than a minute. The aquifer and the water we're using starts up in Canada, comes down through Maine, New Hampshire, into Massachusetts, through parts of Rhode Island, Connecticut, and empties out at Long Island Sound. It's one giant aquifer. It's not Marshfield's, it's not Pembroke's, it's not somebody else's. It's one giant aquifer, and we're all draining water from the same aquifer that was created 10,000 years ago, in the glacial years. Okay? It's a limited supply. That water is there, but it's not there permanently. The more we use, the more it gets drained. How does it get replenished? Not in the summertime when we have droughts, certainly not years like this. Only time it gets replenished is when we have heavy storms in the winter and heavy rains in the spring. Okay, and even then it takes years to go down, to go into the thing. So putting another well in there to water ball fields is, guess what? It's going to use the same water from the same aquifer. It may not be town under metered water, but it's still the same water. There's a limit as to how much water is down there. And guess what? Over time, we all should be concerned about that. Just a closing letter and comment. I think this summarizes everyone's feelings here. This is written to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I want to put things in perspective. First of all of our residents here want to thank all of you for the time you spend as appointed members to the board. Having attended a large number of your meetings over the last few years, we realize a tremendous amount of time and commitment it takes to visit sites. I've heard people saying, I visited that site, look at plans, follow codes and rules, make decisions that affect homeowners, builders, businesses, and the town of Marshfield in general. Having sat through a number of these hearings, most of your decisions have a small yet still important outcome for those involved. Adding a deck, expanding a room, adding an addition to an already existing house. These are all important matters to those involved, as well as their immediate neighbors. We think that you give careful thought to all of these decisions, and we applaud you, and again, appreciate your time and commitment to the town of Marshfield. I know it's a thankless job, and I know you spend a lot of hours, and I appreciate it. Mill Creek's proposal deserves no less consideration. In fact, it deserves even more. Why? Because this population density, twice what's already existing up there, has an immediate and long-term effect upon our neighborhood and the town, with increased traffic, safety issues for residents and pedestrians, safety issue for water volume and pressure. We're already noticing a drop, which is a fire safety issue, potential pollution to the Mount Spergo aquifer, increased school population at a cost of $14,750 per student, and because it will overburden the town of Marshfield with a huge economic liability, which will mean higher real estate taxes. No one's even brought up that subject. Who's going to pay for all these kids going to school? Is Mill Creek or any of those companies going to come up with money? I heard that question asked earlier tonight. It was asked, right? It was asked. And it wasn't in their purview. Wasn't a consideration. Wasn't in their purview. Wasn't under consideration. They don't live here. Quite honestly, they don't care. What does Marshfield have to gain in this process? A few 40B housing rental units, What are the costs? Currently, the ones they have up there are going from $2,500 to $4,500 for monthly rental. And they're calling that affordable? All right? Which are really out of the reach of most people living in Marshfield. It's going to cause an increase in population, traffic, water issues, students, etc. None of us are against 40B housing. Our associations have 40B housing units within our makeup. We are against the enormous development that will produce such a negative impact upon not only our immediate area, but also in the entire town of Marshfield in general. Please consider the immediate and the long-term impact of the second huge project in such a small density area. We're not talking about this, or as Mr. Sullivan said, NIMBY, not in my backyard. It has nothing to do with this location. It has to do with the density of that location, not where it is, okay? What will the future ramifications of your decision bring to the town of Marshfield? How do you want to be remembered for your service to our community? We strongly urge you to reduce this project to a more reasonable number of bedrooms and units, up 10 to 11, which is the current size of Madera 1, as was approved for the first Mill Creek projection. Thank you for hearing our consideration and our grave areas of concern. I have a copy of this.
You can give it to Nancy. Or to me.
Yeah, I'll give it to you, and I'll have other copies for you if anyone wants it. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Anyone else from the audience? Anyone from the virtual world have to speak? On Zoom? No?
Mr. Gallagher has one more thing.
A follow-up?
Dennis Keller again, 19 Snowy Owl. I'm 100% with Mr. Dupuy. We really do appreciate the work that's put in. I mean, as I said, I've been living here, coming before boards off and on until we won cases, okay, and in the land court back then. However, the only thing that I did hear is, what are we going to do for the town? What are we going to do to build this project? But not once did I hear, what are you going to do to mitigate issues in the neighborhood? You know, for the people that actually live there. I haven't heard anybody speak to that from the developers, and I was wondering whether or not there's anything they think that they can do to help us accept what they're trying to do, to make it better for all of us. I don't know where
Yeah,
that
I
is.
just care to answer that.
Not under their purview.
We've agreed to a,
Yeah, I know that. But we do, I mean, we
Okay,
want-
well, he's going to answer, so
Oh,
unless
okay,
you're done
sorry. Go
spoken.
ahead, please.
yeah, we have agreed to a fair share contribution based on our incremental traffic improvements. The contribution for the irrigation of the ball fields, I think, will benefit the whole community, particularly children who are playing down there. And we've also agreed to a number of traffic improvements that are specified in the traffic impact assessment.
I guess what I'm saying is, knowing that you have a good number of seniors living that entire neighborhood, you got 55 and older in Seasons, you have 55 and older in Livermore. We're seniors, we're using that property in a different way. That's the reason they have 55 and older communities. So when you put in a big type of development like you're talking about, it will change how 55 and older seniors in this town live. I think that has to be some room. I think that we have to try and look at it from that standpoint too. We're not against you guys building in there. Density is an issue, but the bigger issue is the effect on all of us who live there. And that's all we're saying. Just the effect it has on all of us. So we should be able to come to some kind of accommodation to make it work for all of us, is what we're saying. And I think the board probably feels the same way. We end up having to accommodate one another to get a deal done, and that's the way everything works in business. It's a deal.
So Greg, I was going to just ask if you have anything in closing.
So being in the hall, it was difficult to hear some of the discussion on where are we tonight? Are we closing the public hearing? Are we continuing?
So we only have till the 4th of September to close the meeting. So that's not really, we can't really have another meeting after this without an extension.
I would like to suggest that
So
you
the
guys
reason I'm bringing
really
it up is that
extend.
once you close the public hearing, interactions with the planning department, GATRA and all that stuff technically can't happen anymore. Because the public record is closed.
Wow.
So just be aware of that.
So Bob, I would ask what our options are to,
If the applicant, if you're not gonna have another meeting before September 4th, and the applicant is not willing to extend, the board has to act. And my recommendation is to close the hearing, use the information you have, use it to develop appropriate conditions, and good to go. It's the applicant's prerogative to extend, and if they don't extend, then I mean, I heard someone ask, state law only gives the board 180 days to act. 180 days end on September 4th. And that's not the board's fault, it's not the applicant's fault, it's where we're at.
There is opportunity for deliberation.
Well, there's 40-day period of
by putting
deliberation.
together a list of conditions that the board would be comfortable with, a draft comprehensive permit for the applicant to look at. So we can.
and they did say they'd be willing for a fair share payment to GATRA.
Correct, we would just need.
Based on ridership.
We would need to come up with some formula for that, or agree that there will be a formula created before the first building permit is listed, and they pay that fee before the first building permit.
So in those 40 days, we can still go back and forth on all these.
No, the board will be deliberating and it'll develop conditions.
I don't think it's a good.
You can choose to share your decision with the public or with the applicant, but you can't take any new information.
Right, but so we can have, our conditions aren't set tonight, they're what we decide.
You're not deliberating tonight, as far as I know.
No.
So we have 40 days to deliberate. and come
40
up
days
with
to
our
deliberate
conditions.
and file a decision with the town clerk.
Now, Bob, would you be able to reopen this if some information came forward that
No,
required? No, it's closed.
without the consent of the applicant and
We'd have to
basically a new public hearing advertised and notice to abutters, no.
Really suggest that we reconsider leaving it open so that we can have an open conversation about comprehensive permit and the waivers and what have you, which we have done in the past. I really think it's in your best interest and ours. I'm just putting that on the record. I can't. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask just one other question?
Sure.
Excuse me. I would ask Mill Creek if they would consider somewhat of an extension, and I say that because on the 23rd of August, the Citizens Community Group submitted a series of questions, and we haven't heard anything back. I resubmitted them again today to the zoning board and to Mr. Pecci, and we would like enough time for those to get answered, so we can then understand what our response to that, but we can't do that unless we get answers to those 20 questions.
I think you sent an email to the
So
effect.
speaking out of turn, because we discussed this, I'm sure that Mill Creek would be willing to sit down and meet and discuss those questions, but we're not going to agree to extend the hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
She said Mill Creek would be willing to sit down and hear your concerns, but they're not willing to extend the meeting.
The answers are more important maybe than the time.
Mr. Chairman, 40 days from today is Sunday, October 9th.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, I just got additional information. You had asked if I knew what the PSI
Yes.
was on those. So in front of my house, it was the mid to high 50s, and down at the Madison, it was in the 80s.
80s?
80s.
I will let someone who's more familiar with this speak on it, but
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get that on the record. 'Cause
in the mid-50s and in the 80s,
There's more than acceptable pressure.
after, anything over 60, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Everything over 60 is not recommended in your house because of other seals and other valves that may not tolerate
Yeah,
that well.
reduction.
Therefore, that many communities, water systems that have that and exceed 60 PSI, they actually install a pressure reducing valve for that home or that dwelling. so that it doesn't exceed 60 PSI, but
But we're not at 60,
you're at 50.
we started at.
Correct.
Right, and the second reading was lower than the first.
Right, and if you-
So
have you-
it
have you
continues to drop with the water as it is right now.
Understood. The testing that was done, witnessed by the Water Department, but testing done with the DPW showed that there was adequate pressure available at the remote sites that they tested in her neighborhood.
I just know that one house they tested at 58 pounds, but I don't know if that was hers.
It was above, and I can read, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, I can read exactly what he said, but he did say, he did actually identify an acceptable pressure, and that's what they found.
And that was the town engineer, the letter that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Rod
Yeah,
engineer.
so he actually had the wrong times that it was tested. He said 6 PM, and it was actually 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
All right, so at this point, I would recommend the board, we take a 5-minute break. then
So
come
can I
back.
ask one
Yeah, go ahead.
quick one? I appreciate everything that you, all the give and take here, going back and forth, but the board here has asked for some more time. The neighbors here have clearly asked for more time. Do you have a reasoning why you wouldn't go? This project's gonna take a few years to be developed out. Is there a reason why you wouldn't want to give it, like, say, a 30-day extension? For this, what would be your reasoning to, to me, it's kind of a bad taste. You've got changes in buildings I'd like to see, the GATRA issue I'd like to see, and that's something I think the community should have a piece of. What is 30 days gonna do in this project, in a multi-million-dollar project?
Yeah, I understand the concern. I hear the request. We're just not in a position to extend this hearing at this point.
Like, that's not very clear. What would the reasoning be?
I think we feel that any, we've heard from the board's expert peer reviewers, and we think that the board has all the information it needs. The additional proposals that we've added can be addressed, as Bob mentioned, through permit conditions, and so we think that provides a clear pathway to
But I mean, even right down to eliminating one building. What building? It's kind of, Heidi is right on mark when she said she'd like to see exactly what she's signing off on. I couldn't agree with her more. You know, you kind of got us over a barrel. Is that the way you want to start this project?
Yeah, I think that we just feel those are things
So
that can
that's a
be
yes.
addressed through permit conditions with final plans submission.
If I could add one thing, Tim Alexander with Mill Creek. If it helps the board, we can provide more clarity this evening on where the 12 units are where that reduction is coming from.
Okay.
Identifying the building and how that.
It's a step in the right direction, sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. But for right now, could we take a 5-minute break? Do we have a second? All right, second, Heidi. All in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Grovey?
Restroom break.
Groveland's aye. Okay.
Restroom break.
Another break. Yeah, we're broke. Back into to order. All right, so I think we've been through everything that we've gone through. We've done the best we can here. And I would say in light of the absence of an agreement to extend the time to complete the public hearing, I move that the board vote to close the public hearing on the application of Mill Creek Residential, case number 22-24.
I think they were interested in the number, where they were going to eliminate units. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We'll see that first then.
Sure. So, as I said before, we would offer to remove another 12 units, and we propose to do that by removing a floor from building D1, which is the apartment building directly south of the pool.
So
In the
B1?
middle, D1, D's and
Oh,
dog.
D1.
Yeah, I see that.
With a dotted line through it, south of the pool.
In the middle of the three buildings, right in front.
The one with the dash line?
Little dash line, yes.
Well, in the middle of the two, do you see it there?
I got no.
So we propose to remove a floor, which is 12 units.
And that would be 12 units, yeah.
So for a total of, we'd end up with 270.
270.
Okay.
Do you figure the number of bedrooms that would be in the reduction?
I don't know off the top of my head. We didn't count those, but it's,
Those with 2 and 3 bedroom units up there?
Well, if they're removing in that entire floor, it would be the number of bedrooms that currently consist in that floor.
that's exactly right. Yes, we just remove the floor completely.
So then removing that floor, that determines exactly what we're
That's
getting.
currently drawn, so.
Yes,
No change to any other unit layouts.
right.
How about the number of affordable housing? Is that gonna stay the same, or are we gonna come down with that as well?
Be 25% to 270.
You can go over that too if you want, right? You don't have to
We
take
could.
25%.
We're proposing 25% to 270.
Right. Go ahead, Bernie.
Is it possible, when you get any kind of agreement or something on paper like this, have it in writing to have not only the number of units, but the number of bedrooms? Because I know the last time this was done, they agreed to go down on the number of units, but in reality, the number of bedrooms increased because they had more 3 bedrooms, eliminating some 1 and adding more 3.
Well, we're currently at 282. You're the math teacher, and we're removing 1 floor from D1. So that's a fixed item. So whatever is currently on that floor, we are removing.
Do you have the count, though?
We do. We have that.
Of number of bedrooms?
We do.
You do, okay. You need to get that in writing again.
It's on the plans.
It's on the
And
plans.
we'll agree not to change the bedroom count in the remaining part of the project.
Thank you.
I just want one other question, if I might. While we're looking at all of this, tonight, when you close the meeting, whatever they have reduced, the total number of units, would you be looking at?
270 units.
270 units. That does not necessarily mean, when you put your conditions, that that could not be a lower.
Correct. We could come back
number,
with
but you would like to
250,
be able
but
to-
they don't have to agree to that.
I understand.
Okay?
Okay, gee whiz, that was terrific. Hey, you guys, not too bad either.
All right, so again, everyone from the board done?
Last time, 2-week extension, you willing to give us 2 weeks?
I'm sorry, but we are not in a position to offer a further extension.
So again, in light of the absence of an agreement to extend the time to complete the public hearing, I move that the board vote to close the public hearing on application of Mill Creek Residential, case number 22-24, Marshfield Commerce Way LLC, located on Commerce Way. Do I have a second?
Larry Keane, second.
All those in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Mark Cohen and I.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Heidi Conway, aye.
You can vote.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Rover?
So
Groveland's aye.
Okay, thank you.
whoever votes is whoever's here. Whoever votes to close it is just for whoever votes for here.
Once Grover is participating remotely.
Right, but it doesn't have to be everybody that's been here the whole time, is what I'm asking. It's just for this meeting, so just non-vote.
Just for
We
this
just had Mr. Sullivan vote on closing the hearing. I think that's the question.
That's- yeah.
as to whether he's voting.
Yeah, well, his vote is after anyways, you have 5, so it's okay.
We have 5. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a,
Generic question is askable.
The hearing's closed.
The hearing's closed, but you can
Right,
ask a
right.
generic board question.
once you meet with them, you said it's not a public.
40
hearing.
days, oh, sorry. So we have 40 days by law to deliberate, draft, and file its decision on the proposed project.
Is that a joint meeting with the two of you, or just your board meeting?
All deliberations are in this room or in another room and done publicly.
Public meetings.
There's no
We can't have
But
negotiation.
you can't speak to us during it, but you can listen to all our, so we can do this anytime in the future.
It'll be an agenda item probably on every ZBA meeting from now until the time they file the decision with the town clerk.
At the end of 40 days, you either accept or come back with conditions, et cetera?
And we don't accept, we come back with our waivers and our conditions.
Right. And if they reject that, what happens?
They can appeal.
They can appeal it.
What if, I guess a hypothetical question, what if you come back with something and it's not something we're happy with?
You can appeal it.
We can appeal it.
You can
right?
appeal it.
Yes.
The group
Okay.
together
Yes,
can do that.
absolutely.
Exactly, that's my point. We can
Any
appeal.
decision we make, you can appeal.
Okay.
As a
I want to
group,
make that
by
clear.
yourself, however you want to do
Well,
it.
as a group, right, we can have, yeah, yeah,
Whatever you want.
thank you. Appreciate it.
At least someone has a sense of humor.
All right, do we have, I don't think we have anything else on the
Think any
agenda.
other business, Nance?
No, that's it. So I'm going to make a motion that we close the meeting.
Larry Keane, second.
All those in favor?
Larry Keane, aye.
Mark Cohen, aye.
Brian Murphy, aye.
Aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye.
Grover?
Corbenzia.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.